It's now my pleasure to welcome our speaker for this morning, David Cuttner, Captain formerly of the U.S. Army. I can only imagine that it was there in the Army, David, where you learned to sacrifice self, to put others first, and to give everything you have to a group of people. David, that is what you do each and every day for us here at Sharet Tzedek. And so I am so pleased that you will be offering your remarks this morning.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. I'm honored to have been asked by our clergy and the Veterans Committee to speak to you about my experiences while serving in the United States military. Most of you will recall there was a time when ROTC, the Reserve Officers Training Corps, was mandatory for incoming freshmen at state-run universities. I elected to attend Michigan State University to major in police administration and industrial security administration, arriving at MSU in 1960 from my hometown in White Plains, New York. In public school, I had taken up the trumpet and daily would play "To the Colors" as we proudly raised the flag and recited the Pledge of Allegiance. How times have changed. It's now 1962, and as Corps Commander of the ROTC Drum and Bugle Corps, I received a request to play taps at a military funeral in Okemos. The funeral was for a sergeant who had been killed in a place I never heard of, South Vietnam. 6 years later, I was on a plane with orders to report there. Vietnam is either hot and wet or hot and humid. My first country experience was on my way to the replacement battalion. I saw the local rat collector, a man carrying his catch on a long bamboo pole with each rat tied by its tail. I learned that plague was transmitted by fleas, and if the count of fleas exceeded a certain number, the area was declared a plague zone, and many restrictions ensued. Luckily, that was not an assignment for a Jewish military police officer. I was now a captain assigned to the 18th MP Brigade and filled a position that called for a major. I was the commanding officer of a military history unit, and my equipment consisted of a camera, tape recorder, .45 caliber pistol, and a set of volumes of the history of the Army in World War II, along with repeated travel orders allowing me to attend to my job. I was tasked to record the history of the brigade. My one accomplishment was compiling and drafting an 86-page after-action report of an MP squad that manned an outpost on the outside perimeter fence. These men were instrumental in the defeat of the enemy in the 1969 Tet Offensive, and afterwards we learned that they intended to overrun Long Binh, which was then the largest logistical installation in the world. After 4 months in that assignment, I was attached to the Provost Marshal's office at Army headquarters. I was a staff officer along with 3 others. I wrote Army regulations to control private contractors' use of privately owned vehicles and weapons. Having a law degree, I was asked to assist with court-martial hearings. I was somewhat skeptical as I thought, how could military police officers be unbiased? But was I surprised? I vividly recall a young draftee trained as a medic that was charged with smoking marijuana at his base camp. The trial board asked why he violated the regulations, and his response was, in tears, that he needed it to relax and only smoked while in camp, never on patrol where he might be needed. The board asked if he had taken R&R, and his response today even brings tears. He responded, "I was scheduled for R&R with my best buddy. Our unit was ambushed and I couldn't save him. He died, so I canceled R&R. The trial board recessed and came back with its verdict. The charges were dismissed. He was to be assigned to the hospital in Saigon for the rest of his tour. The trial board was truly a compassionate group of officers. I personally believe that I represented the United States in that of being a Jew. I was told by my contemporaries that I was the only Jew in the military. But I have to tell you, Passover services were the best. Thanks to a Brooklyn community, we at Long Binh and Jewish troops in the surrounding area were served a delicious kosher meal with all the fixings. Over 250 soldiers were present, and there were a total of 4 such services throughout the country. A young soldier sitting next to me during the service had a cough. I asked him what his job was, and he responded he was a machine gunner. I asked him how that happened when he was from Brooklyn, and he responded that he told the Army he'd like to be out in the country. I told him to see a doctor before he left Long Binh to return to his unit. He objected, but after he saw my captain's bars, he said he would do so. I have to tell you, my boss at Army headquarters was Lieutenant Colonel Frank Cohn, a Jewish career officer having entered the military in 1948. He and I became friends, and I hope he is listening to our service. He emailed me that he is now 90 years old and had this week given a speech on his service and what Veterans Day means to him. Vietnam was a one-year tour. My year was to end in January 1970, but the American effort was diminishing as the people back home were war-weary. Without any advance notice in mid-December, Colonel Cohn walked to my desk and said, "How soon could you clear the post if I could get you on what's called a Freedom Bird?" So he loaned me his Jeep, and I was cleared by the library, the bank, the medics, and from whoever else I needed to obtain a signature from, and was driven the following morning to Tan Son Nhut Air Base for my flight back to the States. I received a Bronze Star, not with the V for valor, but for my administrative abilities on behalf of the military effort. I must tell you that I found the Vietnamese people to be warm, industrious, hardworking, and were only interested in growing their rice and raising their babies. They could care less who was in command and controlled in Saigon. In 2011, my wife Candy surprised me with a cruise that included stops in Da Nang and Saigon. It's now called Ho Chi Minh City. She hired a guide to take us up Highway 1, built by the Corps of Engineers. It's similar to Michigan Avenue. And 18 miles north of Saigon was Bien Hoa, and a sign indicating to take a right turn to Long Binh, now known as Long Binh Industrial Parks 1 and 2. Where the largest logistical installation was, is now occupied by huge buildings with familiar names: Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Lexus, etc. All of them producing auto parts for shipment from what used to be the quiet river, the Dong Nai, now an ocean-going seaport. The Vietnamese love us, but for our guide who took us to view the Cu Chi Tunnels tourist site. There I found a national shooting range where I was offered to shoot an M16, one round for $1 US. I passed on that. The guide informed us that the U.S. invaded her country, stole her people's rice, and shot up their Buddhist statues. After the tour, Candy asked me if we knew where the tunnels were, why didn't we bomb them, forgetting her involvement with the anti-war protests. Saigon, oh, that's Ho Chi Minh City, is booming. We even visited the Chabad house and learned its rabbi counsels 108 Israeli physicians and staff that opened a clinic in addition to serving tourists from all over the world looking for kosher meals. That's my story as a veteran of the Vietnam War. I am much luckier than many of my fellow veterans, and I wish them well. I have a sign on my office window that states, "Definition of a veteran." A veteran, whether active duty, retired, National Guard, or Reserve, is someone who at one point in his or her life wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their life. That is honor. Unfortunately, there are many people throughout the world in this country who no longer understand it. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to tell my story. Shabbat Shalom.
David, my friend, we are indebted to you for your service to our country. We're indebted to you for your incredible service to our congregation. We're indebted to you for your outstanding blueberry pancakes that you make on Friday mornings after Minyan. We're indebted to you because you share your family with us. You and Candy, Wendy and Philip and the kids do so much for our great congregation. And it's clear that it starts with you, your devotion to other, your desire, your need to care for others. Thank you.